care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow.
Welcome to the Oshow, Canada's current affairs show with strong opinions. And wow, Canada, do we have a lot to talk about? Of course, there was the huge threat of 25% tariffs from the Trump administration. They're not even here yet, but they're already freaking out Canada. I know we'll get a great guest in to talk about all things Trump coming up. And speaking of Trump, we had our illustrious premier here in Ontario, Doug Ford, say that he feels betrayed or stabbed in the back, or it's like family turning on you, or some kind of rhetoric this morning because, you know, he thought that Trump and him were buds, I guess. But as we've said many times on this program, Trump is a dictator. He does not respect people who are acolytes or who genuflect to him publicly like our premier has done. While all of this is going on, somebody who I think helped Doug Ford cruise right into his second majority is, of course, Andrea Horwath, who is the mayor of Hamilton. She came up on 2 years as, I was going to say, leader of the city, but I think that's in question. She came up on 2 years as being the mayor. And after historic buildings from the 1840s, older than the city, collapsed because of neglect under her watch in our downtown Gore Park, I did an op-ed in the Hamilton Spectator decrying her collapsing leadership and how it's harming our civic pride. And so there's nobody better to discuss the state of our civic pride than Graham Crawford. He is a former Hamilton Citizen of the Year, also wrote some very powerful op-eds himself in the Hamilton Spectator around the state of Hamilton. Welcome back to the Oshow, my friend.
Thank you, Laura. I've been looking forward to coming back.
It's not only do you know what you speak, of course, because you pay such close attention, but you have a long and illustrious background. And by illustrious in this context, I mean it. I was being facetious when I was talking about our illustrious premier. But you do have an illustrious background in corporate management globally and being a leader in and helping other leaders to be better leaders themselves. And when we look at Andrea Horwath, I was struck by a comment that I just received on social media, just saying that, you know what, I think the quote was, to see your leader do absolutely nothing is agonizing. And so I just want to start there with you, Graham. The number one comment I had back to that op-ed over the last few days was that she has done nothing. Her visibility is almost nil. And it seems to me that all of her so-called leadership is reactionary to crisis. What is sort of your overall view of her at the 2-year mark? And then we can get into some very specific and I think troubling things going on at City Hall that you've certainly made me aware of.
Well, the pattern of poor leadership continues. It started as soon as she was elected. Some might say it started many years before that, but elected as mayor. The problem is, I mean, 2 years have passed, as you mentioned, Laura, and this is an anniversary. We got nothing to celebrate here. What Andrea seems to do, it's sort of after the fact outrage, and she, she mentions directives and edicts and mayor powers, and she uses language that's strong, but actions that are weak or non-existent. Or she says stuff that council's already debated and decided on, but then she spins it as if it was hers. She's desperate for a win, and so far, nothing's happening. Just nothing is happening. And at some point, God knows, I would have thought she would have figured this out some time ago, is that all roads lead to the mayor. And if nothing is happening, you can't blame the world if you're the mayor. You have to start looking inwardly and say, what am I not doing that I could be doing differently to make things better? And we're still getting photo ops and this manufactured outrage after the fact.
You know, it's interesting because somebody pointed out to me, I've had a couple of comments, and as you know, this show is always engaged with our viewers, one person said, we'll never talk about ward responsibility here. And I don't think that's accurate. I think that Cameron Crouch is a downtown councillor. I have put out publicly that I'd wished more had come from him, especially after the city found out those buildings were going to collapse or were in jeopardy of collapsing back in June. And I actually saw him at Gore Park on Saturday. He came by to visit. He's visible. We had a conversation about it. So we know from Cameron's perspective as a ward councillor that he is upset about it and being very communicative about it. And so I appreciate that from that point of view. But you're right about the fact that things come up to the mayor. Leadership is really about the person at the top. Andrea Horwath makes more than Mayor Olivia Chow in Toronto. So I'm going to say that again because it shocks me every time I say it. Andrea Horwath makes more money a year from the taxpayers than the mayor of Toronto makes. So look at the size of the cities, look at the complexity of those positions, and it's absolutely egregious that Andrea Horwath is making almost $300,000. Now, I wouldn't begrudge her that amount if I saw her earning it. But, somebody pointed out to me today as well on social that Mayor Fred, for all of his issues, and I would say his scandals, let's not forget about Sewergate or the Red Hill, but he was always present, active, even if he was being incalcitrant or grousing. Andrea has zero engagement, and that makes people sad, Graham. Like the people I talk to, and I've had tons and tons of comments on this, they feel hopeless because they believed in her. They never really believed in Mayor Fred because, he was kind of like, wallpaper. But they believed in Andrea because she was going to be that scrapper. She was going to return to her hometown. She was going to take all those fights from Queen's Park against Ford, and she was going to stand up and stick it to that premier. And so how do you reconcile the fact that she had the direct experience of taking on this premier when she was the leader of the official opposition of Ontario and has not used that voice at all?
Oh, I absolutely believe I know why. Because she's lazy. She's lazy. She had over 30 staff when she was at Queen's Park, feeding her, doing all the research, writing the sound bites for her, and just handing them to her, and then she would do her shtick. Well, she's got a $1 million budget for the mayor's staff, office staff, but she doesn't have that kind of crew working for her, that kind of team. And I'm not criticizing the team she has, but it's a different league. It's a different game. And so I would question how many of the reports is she reading? I watch her comments at council, and goodness knows, I would conclude that she's not read many of them because she has nothing to say about them. Her questions of staff are terrible. She often mentions that she has written remarks, but she didn't use them. She actually says it, which is really stupid, in my opinion. That's a junior mistake. You don't say stuff like that after 27 years of doing this for a living. So honestly, I think she's lazy. And, if somebody said, oh, but she's gone to all these events. Yeah, because they're easy. They're not difficult. Glad handing at events, having your picture taken, or having your staff, post pre-prepared tweets or whatever posts of a particular holiday or an event. That's not hard work. That's the easy stuff. The hard work, as you know, is making very, very difficult decisions. And I would say, to be fair to everyone around that table, we are facing a lot of major issues at the moment, possibly greater than we faced for a few decades. So it more falls to the mayor to show leadership. And so I'll end where I started. She's lazy. Andrea is too lazy.
Well, because I just want to pick up on that a little bit, because I think there's two kinds of mayors, right? There are the mayors who do the minimum, who go out and do the photo ops, do the glad handing, do the Christmas, New Year's levies, or whatever the hell she's going to spend her time and our money on this year. And then there are the mayors who set a vision, who want to push the city forward, and as I look back on it, I used to think Bob Morrow spent a lot of time just doing the baby kissing, glad handing kind of thing, but he also fiercely engaged with council. he would know his votes, and they would follow him. So to me, the definition of a leader is, are people following you? It's not a title, it's not a paycheck, it's, are people following you? And they would follow him. And I'll even give Larry some credit here. Mayor Larry Diani, when he was mayor, he had a vision for a downtown renaissance. I saw a lot of his things. He was out, he made people feel like he was on the job. People might not have liked how he approached it or who he was working with or whatever. And I was certainly critical of him at the time as well on things. But I got the sense that he was in it to win it, that he had a connection to the community, and he was passionate. And I can't understand why Andrea is squandering her equity as a leader. She had political capital coming into this gig. It's why she won. She only won by 1% because she didn't mount much of a campaign, but she still won because people believed that she would care. And if you don't, go ahead.
I've said, Laura, several times on the Oshow, Andrea is a fraud, and I think she was a fraud then. Only it's more obvious now because she's not in the official opposition or in opposition, where the job is basically to criticize. I mean, I think those who are leaders in opposition offer alternatives and ideas. She never did that. And if it happened at all, it was the party doing it. It wasn't Andrea. When you're the mayor, you don't have the whole party behind you. You don't have research teams and outreach and so on. You have to do that yourself. And she's not doing it. She is not doing it. Let me give you an example. So this is a perfect example, in my opinion, of what Andrea does, and it isn't helping. She strikes the mayor's task force. And when anybody does the, task for the mayor's task force, the blue ribbon task force, it's like, oh my God, this is going to be big. And then it's like nothing on transparency and accountability, or accountability and transparency. I got to remember the sequence, but those are the two themes. And as far as Andrea is concerned, that was it. I've declared there will be a mayor's task force. She doesn't go to the meetings. She's not leading anything. She's waiting for them to come back. And most recently, this mayor's task force held a meeting in council chambers of an evening within the last couple of weeks. Well, they asked delegates to come and comment on how's the city doing in terms of accountability and transparency, and what would you recommend, and so on. And they put the message out. They held the meeting, and no one showed up. Zero. No delegates. So how does that happen? Well, I think one of the ways it happens is if you're the mayor, you delegate this, call it a big name, and then never show up. So there's no energy around it. There's no focus that the public sees. I don't think she's ever mentioned it again. And so some stupid report's going to come back saying, oh, the public is very keen on accountability and transparency, and we definitely want more of both. What exactly are we trying to do here? And how are we doing? And do we need to redirect the work of this task force? Well, nobody knows because there's nothing to talk about. That's an example of, in my view, of Andrea. She has a list of things that's either been fed to her, or she says, "Well, I think we should do something," because it was in her platform, and you know better than anyone. There was precious little in that platform, but accountability and transparency got mentioned, and nothing has changed. And I would say, if anything, it would be worse because the mayor puts her office behind it, and nobody shows up.
Okay, so I have to stop you there because I have run 1,000 events, honestly, between all my clients and all the big parties and all the power conferences and everything. I'm sure it's been 1,000 kinds of meetings or events over the years, even when I ran a Chamber of Commerce. Never once have I run something where nobody shows up. And you know why? Because I cared about the event. Because I would talk to my team and I would say, how are we looking? What does it look like? Let's track the responses. What's the agenda? How are we going to position this? Who's going to be in the seats? Bums in the seats are everything. How are we making this happen? I was very, very focused on having people attend events because that's what creates the energy you speak of. That's what creates the opportunity for ideas to be exchanged, for people to feel a sense of empowerment or hope or vision or direction. And so when you tell me that her own task force invited delegates and her $1 million office working with her couldn't get a single person to show up, but still held the event, that to me is malpractice on a PR events management level that is literally gobsmacking to me. I mean, how do you put your name on something and care so little about it that you can't even get someone to show up and you still run the event? You don't even have the heads up that it's going to be a freaking flop and failure. It's embarrassing, Graham. Like, sorry, go ahead.
It's unconscionable is what it is, because it's indicative, because as I said, it's a perfect example. I mean, it's, in and of itself, it's a problem, but it's representative of the kind of shape we're in. Laura, since we started this show, you've used this word twice. And I've been using the word in my head and also when I speak with people, and the word is hope. My biggest concern right now about Hamilton is that we have lost hope. We don't see good things happening that give us hope. I mean, Hamiltonians are smart enough to realize it takes time to fix big issues. But when you lose hope that we're even chipping away at them, that's not a good place to be. And when you're feeling hopelessness, even if you're comfortable, but you want to make sure that others are also comfortable, but it isn't happening, at least not to the extent that we were promised, you start to lose hope. And then hope turns to despair at some point. I don't think we're there yet, but we're getting there. And then you raise taxes and people say, well, I've lost hope, but you want more money for the thing that I don't see happening. So no wonder there's a disconnect there. No wonder people get upset when these bullshit budget discussions happen, which are going on right now as we're speaking. Big number could be, whatever, 9.3%, and then they get it down to 5.2 or whatever, quote, magic they pull every budget term. People don't believe them. You take that disbelief, lack of trust in leadership, lack of demonstration of leadership by our mayor, rising taxes, and greater suffering in our community. And what does that look like? It looks awful. I bet you, Laura, if we pulled 10 people together and said, what has given you the most hope, the change in this city that's happened in the last 2 years, what would you say? And you know what? I think we'd have to give them 20 minutes to think about it. And even then, I'm not so sure we'd get a good answer.
I need 20 minutes to think about it. Like as you were putting it out rhetorically, I was thinking, I was really searching my mind, and you and I have been really tough, and especially me, and rightfully so, on Councillor John Paul Danko for his constant denigrating of people living in encampments. He might say he's just denigrating the encampments, but those are full of
people. And among other people, yes, that's exactly what he's been doing.
Right. But he put out a post today, I think I saw it, where he was talking about the incremental improvements being made on housing and how it takes a long time. And it was devoid of his usual rhetoric or his recent rhetoric. So I was thinking, is that hope? I mean, it was kind of a process post, but it was still of everything that I have seen coming out of City Hall. I can't think of hope other than a few housing units that have come up. Literally nothing else. I've seen the mayor tour the entertainment district painting of cops or whatever the hell, but no hope. And I just want to pick up on what you're saying, because the number one thing that I'm feeling these days, between Trump coming in, and we're already seeing the rubber hitting the road with that already on the tariffs, as I said. He's going to be terrible, and we already see that. What Ford is doing trying to own municipalities, his culture wars, all the garbage and the waste, and spending billions of our dollars on stupid stuff like a spa we don't need and a tunnel to nowhere. And then you have locally our historic Gore Park buildings collapsing. I mean, I'm not a historian like you. I don't live in Durand like you do, but it is crushing to be down at Gore Park on Saturdays working, with people who are in hunger and homelessness and seeing that giant gaping hole. It is emblematic of I think the overall neglect of not just, I mean, a couple of years ago, we had somebody say on this program, or we talked about a counselor saying, I think Maureen Wilson at the time, that our city is managing its decline. Being down there this past Saturday, I don't even feel like Mayor Andrea Horwath is managing our decline. I feel like our decline is accelerating in front of her face, and she doesn't even know it. I mean, the fact that the city on the Friday before Novembrance Day visited that building, still gave a permit for people to gather there. Hours difference, Graham. And those blocks could have fallen and killed our veterans, could have killed people who line up, many or whom, are in mobility devices, who couldn't have moved out of the way of the crumbling. I mean, people could have died. And we would be doing this Oshow calling for her resignation, not just calling for her to give some hope to our community. So I just don't want us to lose sight. This is not you and I complaining because we thought Keenan Loomis would have been a better, more active choice for mayor. This is Gore Park's buildings collapse this past week.
I agree. And by the way, because we talk about people being there for Remembrance Day, just 24 hours before. On Halloween, there was a children's hay bale maze directly in front of the building where the stones fell. So, because you can't say, oh, well, yeah, but that was the end of October. We're talking weeks. Kids in a maze, literally probably closer than the veterans were who were marching. Just appalling. So how did that happen? Well, I mean, I don't put all the blame on Andrea. On the other hand, I expect a certain kind of response. And it is 2 years, after all, that we could have been, if we're monitoring these things. On the other hand, you have to, at some point, even as the mayor, if you say to staff, how are we doing on those Gore Park building? And they say, well, we've got our building inspectors in regular contact with regular visits. What is she supposed to do? Then you have to ask the question, because one of the things that I'm worried about, because I've been watching how this thing is getting discussed in council chambers, and at least at the public discussion, is staff doesn't want to give too much info, it seems. They want to say, oh, that's because it's an investigation. We're pulling this bullshit SIU thing where the cops say, oh, we can't comment because the SIU is now involved. It's like, well, you mean you can't say anything? Of course you can say something. You just can't be too precise. How the hell do we have building inspectors who go in there, tell the owner, we're very concerned about the stability of these structures, these facades, and then no action is taken? Whose responsibility is that? Well, ultimately, of course, it's the owner of the building. But what do the building inspectors do? What does the building department do? Do they just throw out a notice and then leave it and hope it gets better? So there's going to be an internal investigation, which is already happening. But I watched a council meeting and I saw Brad Clark almost lose it. And Brad's doing his best to contain his frustration, but it's showing from more and more with what's going on. And Cameron Kretsch, my counselor, Ward 2 counselor, asked the questions as well of the building department. When might we see this report? The response was Q1 of 2025. So that means they get until the end of March. If you accept that, they have up until the end of March for the report. It's like, no. Brad Clark basically said, no way. We're not going to wait 4.5 months for this, quote, investigation. And what that said to me was, number one, staff aren't working fast enough. Two, I think they might need to cover some asses, and that may take a little longer than 3 to 4 weeks. I don't know that, but I worry about it. I realize this could get quite legal On the other hand, people are screaming about what we should hit them with fines, huge fines. And there are some things in the legislation that permit large fines. The problem is you can't be complicit in that. So if you say your buildings aren't secure and then you don't go back and check for 3 or 4 months, or the kind of checking you do is what, a walk around? I mean, how could we expect a building inspector to look at a building and say, well, those facades are going to come down in, I think, about 10 hours. I mean, they can't do that. They're not that skilled. So I don't know what kind of fines we would even be allowed to levy. I mean, aside from the legislation, because all the building owner has to do is to say, well, wait a minute. I mean, you didn't come back. So anyway, all that to say, I think the mayor is acting as a spectator. I think we have some issues with staff, and I think the new city manager, I mean, I thought when Marnie Clucky took over the job, I thought, well, good luck. I mean, you're going to be overwhelmed. It gets worse every week.
Okay.
Every week.
So I just want to pick up on a couple of things. I do not accept that those building inspectors didn't know it was falling down, because my husband knew it was falling down. Every time we'd be at Gore Park on Saturdays, he'd be like, there's more rubble on the cement. We shouldn't be anywhere near these buildings, right? And he's not a stonemason. He can do house renos a little bit, but he knew. So when you have a warning in June to the city officially that these buildings have an issue, and then you have an inspection before a major event like Remembrance Day and all the other activities in our town square at Gore Park, you are not engaged if you are not doing more than what we saw. So to the point of, can they fine the developer, this, that, and the other thing? I don't know. I'm not a legal mind. I don't know. But what I do know is that a developer told me right before the weekend before the election, where Mayor Andrea Horwath won, they told me that they were assured that if they put the developers back here, that it would be status quo in Hamilton, meaning that they would continue to run the town. And I don't know what her relationship was with this big developer from Gore Park, but certainly we all know the guy by name, because there was all kinds of, group sessions in front of these buildings and all this other stuff for years. Did she ever pick up the phone and talk to him? Did she have any relationship? Was it just like, you guys do whatever the hell you want in this town? Let these buildings fall so you don't have to fix them. It's what do they call it? Donation by dereliction.
She got a donation from him.
Did she really?
Yeah, I looked at it this week. There's a whole bunch of developers that she got donations from, and some very large. Well, the maximum amount was $1,200, as you know. So,
if you're not doing more to keep someone to account, you have to ask, why not? Why not pick up the phone and say, we got this report in June, we're very concerned about this building, you're supposed to be fixing these facades, it looks like these facades might crumble, right? So I think there's, the staff can drag this out till the end of Q1 to March if they want to about those buildings, but this conversation would be extremely different, Graham, if anyone had been hurt. So you know what, I'm thrilled that nobody was, but I can't have a mayor of my city acting like a spectator to collapsing buildings, a spectator to a drug poisoning and homeless crisis, where people are literally bent over all over downtown on these, whatever it is that they're on, suffering. I can't have a mayor who's a spectator, who doesn't even show up to her own task force, who doesn't even make sure that delegates are going to attend meetings that she calls. Andrea Horwath is beyond lazy. She is watching our city collapse in front of her eyes and doing nothing but saying, after these tragedies happen one after another, oh, wow, we need a task force on this. I need to call a committee on this, and then doesn't even see it through. We need a mayor who cares, not a mayor who watches.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. I think she is absolutely a spectator. She uses her staff to attend important meetings, which, again, I mean, that can be a very efficient use of great staff. However, when you have stated priorities, like the housing crisis, like the homelessness crisis, like the tiny shelters project on the Barton Tiffany lands, She doesn't go to those meetings. They're having internal planning meetings on that thing. She never goes to
They
those.
didn't even file with the province that they were doing a project over $50,000. So the construction on those tiny homes got halted. I mean,
Yeah.
what kind of leadership is that from the city manager that they missed letting the province know that they're going to be doing this? I mean,
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. By the way, I think we have an extreme level of incompetence. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's always been this way. I don't know if we've lost the good ones, because I do know a lot about organizational behavior. And it's the good people who leave first. They seek employment elsewhere. And I know we've had a brain drain at City Hall, and then we're left with people. And by the way, I mean, there are examples that would prove that based on what I'm seeing, as you know. I'm going to offer one ray of hope, but it's not the kind of hope that I was referring to earlier. It's very small. We have an office of the Attorney General the Auditor General in Hamilton. And I've watched this guy present to council. He has a very small team. It's like a handful of people, but he does internal audits, and he does them for real. These are real audits of inputs, outputs, results, impact, efficiencies. I've read a number of these reports, and quite frankly, they're first-class reports. They're very good. This guy needs to have his staff doubled because we got so much crap going on. And look, I get him. Marnie Clucky must feel overwhelmed. She has just hired herself a chief of staff, which is good. She needs one.
I mean, she's been in the job for almost a year, hasn't she?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
How could a city manager of a city the size of Hamilton just get around to getting a chief of staff?
Well, the city manager didn't always have a chief of staff. They had some kind of combo hybrid, right-hand person. This is different. And she's also hired a communication, or she's looking for a communications person. All I want to say, though, is I would say to every member of council, you want to find some savings, then spend money on the office of the Auditor General, because he'll find money for you. He'll also fix things. Mike Spatafora, Mr. Bullshit, I keep saying that word this show.
Up to 3 times you said the S word. One of my producers is like, you swear too much on the show, Laura. You shouldn't swear so much. And you've dropped 3 S-bombs. No, you go for it. And I'm going to add mine as we go forward.
Well, Mike Spatafora from Ancaster put forward a motion requesting that the Office of the Auditor General do an audit of the money the city is spending on homelessness. Now, if I believe that Mike Spatafora was doing that to make it better, I'd say, well, good. It's already, by the way, on the books. They're going to do this audit. It literally, if you took the time to read the reports, it says that next year there's an audit happening. But Mike's doing his theater bullshit, stuff. And
I'm going to drink every time you drop a bomb.
We'll be drunk by the end of this show.
Working on it. Little Bailey's in the coffee.
This political theater about, I'm getting told we're spending so much money. This guy didn't ask a single question about the police budget of, $250 million per year. No, he hasn't got any questions about that, but he wants an audit. I insist on an audit so we can find out if we're getting value for money as it relates to homelessness. And I'm sure there will be efficiencies. After all, this is a new crisis. So it's not like we've been dealing with this for the last 15 years and we have processes in place and all kinds of stuff. We're making it up as we go along, and that's understandable.
Because nobody at this level. I mean, the homeless crisis has been here. We just haven't seen it until the pandemic.
And it's getting worse.
Definitely.
So anyway, I don't want to put a plug in for residents, the viewers who watch this show or listen to it. Check out our Office of the Auditor General. There is some bureaucratic hope in there, some administrative hope in there.
Hold on a second. So are you telling me, are you actually saying out loud that the hope for Hamilton under the leadership of Mayor Andrea Horwath is the bureaucrats? Like, we're at a point now where the thing that we used to decry as, mediocre management in the city is now the best thing that we can count on.
What I am saying is the Auditor General is finding the problems with the people that we've mentioned in the past. I mean, I know that you've posted recently, like in the last day or two. Apparently, we had an employee, full-time employee at the managerial level, who had another full-time job with another city at the same time.
Is that true? Because a viewer told me that, and Joey apparently had reported on it.
Oh, it's true.
It's true?
It's true. Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, can we also go ahead? Go ahead.
They fired. I would say, and what else? Are you clawing back the money? Because I think there is a message that needs to be sent. I mean, yeah, we might have to spend some money, although we have lawyers, for God's sake. We have staff lawyers. This can't be that complicated. If he was double dipping, I mean, figure out when he started his job at the other place, because there's an overlap.
Yeah.
And say, you pay us back the following, and we'll get a court order, and we'll start taking your property if we have to. But you are not stealing from the taxpayers of Hamilton. But I haven't heard that part yet. Now, maybe we're going to do that. But a mayor might actually comment on that. A mayor might also comment on other things that are happening or should be happening. But she doesn't.
So let me bring up, you mentioned, since we're talking about staff, I heard something the other day, and I'm laughing because I didn't see it with my own eyes, but it sounds so ridiculous on its face that it cracks me up, because I just can't. So I think you saw this. Tell me if I'm mischaracterizing it. It was one of the task force the mayor set up on, I think, on the housing crisis, right? And the staff came to report to council on, as we've discussed here, arguably the most serious thing happening in our city. Not the only city in Canada dealing with a homeless crisis and a drug poisoning crisis, but Hamilton seems to be doing a particularly terrible job of addressing it. And we have a mayor who is essentially quiet on the issue, giving no hope. So these staff come in to do their reports on this deadly serious issue, where we have people dying, I think, like every 8 days in this city from it. And they were cheering for each other, like full glee squad kind of glee club kind of action, Graham, like as in, yes, well, we managed to do this and that on housing. Yay, Brenda. Over to you, Joe. I mean, is that what this was happening in front of council? And if so, how the hell did council react to that?
That's exactly what happened. It was like an offsite for a sales team, where you're split into groups and you're allowed to, put on funny costumes or give your team a name, and then you come up and you present your accomplishments and your goals, and everybody goes, yay. Like, I mean, literally, yay. This is a council meeting with people dying in the streets, literally dying in the streets. And the head of our housing secretariat is leading the cheer. People are hooting and hollering. And all they're doing is presenting the work that they're supposed to do. They haven't done anything that is worthy of standing up and cheering. I mean, I'm not saying they haven't done anything, but I will say, I don't think that the content of these presentations was not worthy of that kind of reaction. Billy has worked with people to come up with a new process for a new intake model. Yippee. What does that do? Thanks, Billy. I thought we paid you to do that. And I don't know who designed this presentation, but I'm guessing it was the leader of the Housing Secretariat, who's a relatively new person. He was hired by the mayor directly 17 months ago, something like that, and a year and a half ago. And I got to tell you, it's been a mystery. I mean, it's like, I knew of the existence of the Housing Secretariat. I've asked people that I know, what's happening? What are they doing? Why aren't they communicating this? Because back to our word of hope, there could be a fountain of hope coming out of the Housing Secretariat if properly managed. And I watched that meeting. I saw every single one of the little 2-minute presentations, followed by the cheering. And there was nothing in there that gave me any real hope. I will say this, however, among the things that the Housing Secretariat took credit for was at City Housing Hamilton. We got rid of the old guard who've been running that shop for years. So there's new people in there. It's the head of that now. I mean, there's a staff person, but in terms of the chairperson is Narinder Nan. They have, since Narinder took over, and there's new board members, including Councillor Kretsch and others. There were over 600, I think, 575 vacant units in City Housing Hamilton, which is unconscionable.
Yep.
Well, that number has now been reduced to, I think it's now less than 100. So they're going to complete them all. They needed to be renovated. That was why they were vacant. People couldn't live in them, so they fixed them up. Duh, good idea. The vacancy rate at City Housing Hamilton has gone from almost 10%, which is, again, unconscionable. Old guard was managing this for years. 10% vacancy rate is now down to, it will, by the end of this year, be 2%. That's progress. That gave me hope. Now, I've known about those numbers because they've been published, and I don't know that they had anything to do with the housing secretariat. That's my concern.
Well, I had Councillor Narinder Nan on the Oshow since she took over, I believe. So, people can go back and look at that episode, and we might have discussed it then. But that, I think we did actually. But that is a significant, yes, duh, it should have been done all along. But I don't think that, who wasn't it? What's his face? Chad Collins, now an MP, who was the head of City Housing Hamilton forever, it felt like.
Yeah, I've heard that name, Chad. What was the last name?
I don't know. He has, ever since he became an MP, we've heard nothing of him except for maybe through Spadafora. But
the only noise I can have, Chad Collins.
Who's the guy in Stony Creek who is always piping up about the Stony Creek councillor? Is it Spadafora?
Francis.
Oh, Francis, right. Francis might be the closest thing we've
any Chad Collins. Yeah. Yeah, no, the only sound I ever hear from Chad Collins is when he's cashing his check. I mean, he doesn't do anything. Anyway, but Matt Francis is another good example. So recently, he was ejected from council by the then acting chair, Brad Clark, who gave him plenty of time. Because what Matt Francis was doing was doing this notwithstanding clause promo thing for Doug Ford. He was doing Doug Ford's work. And he was saying some things that, basically said, my version, but it's pretty damn close, and the video will prove it, that rather than support, he was saying that there are many people around this table who support drug addicts in drug addicts and creating drug addict provincial parks. That's what he said. And so Mayor Andrea Horwath said, wait a minute, you can't impugn the motives of your colleagues. Now, and of course, to do that, she had to give the chair over to Brad Clark, which she did. Brad then said to Matt Francis, I would encourage you to apologize, withdraw your remarks, and just continue on. And Matt Francis, I think this was all set up ahead of time. Matt Francis said, I will not apologize for standing up for the rights of mothers in parks with their children. And I almost puked when I heard it. It's like, what are we pandering? This bloody pandering. Who's talking about, what is he suggesting? We have people in council who are anti-mothers and anti-children. I mean, come on, it's just nonsense. And guess what? Matt Francis made it to the front page of the Hamilton Spectator, being quoted saying that, which is exactly what he wanted. But Matt Francis is just the newest member of the pandering patrol. Tom Jackson is the team captain on that one. That's all he does is he panders.
Isn't Tom 35 years into the gig from his pandering? So he panders extremely well, apparently.
Oh, it works. This is the problem. It works if your goal is to get reelected. If your goal is to make a better city, it doesn't. That kind of pandering doesn't move us forward in leaps and bounds. What it does is it fixes potholes or gets new playground equipment in a park in your ward, or gets a crosswalk repainted. In my view, that's what a customer service rep can do. That's not what a counselor should be doing. I mean, but this is what Tom is, Laura, he's your counselor.
well, he's not my counselor by choice, but I happen to live in Ward 6. But let me say this on Matt Francis's comments. Not only is it obviously pandering and setting up this false narrative about mothers in parks with their kids versus people who are, homeless, not by choice, but by economic circumstance. But the disparagement of people who have addiction or who are substance users makes me crazy, because I know counselors around that table who like to imbibe, right? They like their drug of choice when they go to their nice warm home, and nobody judges them for that. And people who are in addiction and are suffering and unable to get mere shelter deserve our highest degree of empathy and community, not derision, just to get on the front page of the fucking Hamilton Spectator. So shame on Matt Francis for saying that. Shame on anybody else who set that up or advised him to say that. And shame on the mayor for not just saying you can't call into question the motives of your colleagues. She should have spoken out right there in that moment. And if she did, and I don't know about it, then I apologize. She should have, in that moment, addressed those comments and how horribly unfair they are to people who call Hamilton home, who have to live in lean-tos and tents all over our city, downtown, on the mountain, on the accesses, in the laneways, because this council and previous councils have not given a damn about people in our city who are suffering in abject poverty and homelessness. So anybody on council who is going to try to divide our community between parents and children and people who are experiencing addiction and homelessness don't have a clue what is actually going on in our community and don't have an ounce of compassion nor an ounce of my respect. I just need to put that on the record, Graham, because that false dichotomy culture war bullshit is driving people into death in our community. It is a deadly game that this counselor is playing by trying to further marginalize and denigrate people who are suffering with addiction and no home. How the hell would you get through the day this winter in Hamilton when you don't have a home, you don't have a place to wash your hands, you don't have a bed to sleep on? You don't think you'd also be using something to keep you alert during the night to protect yourself? Like, come on.
Yep, no, I agree, Laura. It's very well said and well felt. Because I do watch so many of these council meetings, and I do see these patterns emerge. What I can say, and the trigger there was Matt Francis, but there's a group of them who support this notwithstanding clause, among other things. Get people out of parks. We don't care. We don't know where they're going to go, and we don't care. They don't have a solution amongst them. So that's people like Matt Francis, Tom Jackson, Mike Spadafora, Jeff Beattie. There are others. I'd have to think, but those for sure. They always complain. John Paul Danko to a certain extent, although he understands that, if you got a problem, you at least have to come up with a solution. But he maybe is a little too readily in favor of some of their stuff. But there is no solution. To his credit, Brad Clark has said to his colleagues, I've watched him say it, you can have an opinion. You can say, I don't want this, but what's your solution? And he's looked directly at Matt Francis when he said this. And he's absolutely right. Now, Brad will say that and then vote with them. So, he says it's correct. If you don't have a solution, then, you can't just come and whine, because all it is about getting reelected. It plays really well. These guys will all get reelected because they play that game. The councillors are actually trying to do the very difficult work, especially those that are accepting these shelters, whether they're temporary or permanent, are getting pushback from their constituents. but they know it's the right thing to do. So we have the mountain mob up there who are watching, looking down on us, saying we don't want any of them up here, and letting councillors in the lower city have to say yes, will help to make this work. That is unconscionable, in my opinion. It's unfair, it's unprofessional,
And it's
and
bullshit.
the problem is they will be rewarded for it.
I know, but it's bullshit because I cannot go 50 yards from my house on the mountain without running into a neighbor who is experiencing homelessness. Not 50 yards, right? There are now people going down my suburban street with their shopping carts, which, by the way, is a good thing to have if you have nothing else in your entire life has to be mobile. So it's bullshit. Tom Jackson, you know better than that. And so does John Paul Danko, and so does Esther Pauls. And unless they never leave their backyard, the challenge of people being unhoused is on the mountain right now. Gone are the days of the lower and upper city having two different standards of living or existence. It's happening here. So when they do this mountain gang where they look down on downtown and don't want to deal with any of that and say, oh, you know what, we'll give into this as long as they never come up to our parks. They're already in our parks. So how about you help them instead of pretending they're not here? I just think it is deplorable. I'm not calling the counselors deplorable. I'm saying that to pretend that the problem isn't in their wards because it sells better or because they are lazy or ignorant, or I don't believe they're ignorant of it, Graham. I believe that it is a calculated thing to continue this artificial divide between the upper and lower city. Just like Councillor Francis is dividing families with kids from families who have somebody in homelessness, right? These divides are killing people. And I know I'm emotional, but literally somebody who was watching me dance last week while I was handing out cookies has died. So this is not abstract.
I agree, Laura. It isn't abstract. And this is what is so frustrating and disappointing about their behaviors. And if I think one of the most unfortunate terms that's emerged from this whole crisis is compassion fatigue. It's like, you mean you're getting tired of caring for people? Like what? Like seriously, give your head a shake. Oh, and the problem is people have latched onto it as if to suggest, well, it's okay because I was compassionate, but I'm really getting really tired of caring. So therefore, it's okay to round these people up and put them. I don't care where the hell they go as long as they're not. I can't see them. That the compassion fatigue. The phrase should be outlawed. It's just a horrible, horrible phrase. And anyone who verbalizes it and uses it as an excuse, in my opinion, should really be ashamed of themselves, because look at the two words, like they don't go together. You don't get to turn it off and on. You either are compassionate or you're not. This is very difficult compassion because this is a very, very difficult problem to solve. We are making some progress, but not enough, not fast enough. We are not building fast enough. And that money that we're spending, the $186 million we're going to be spending as a city on homelessness and housing, unfortunately, is going to continue to go up. It's not going down. And on that point, can I make this point, Laura? Because here's a practical thing for those people who have counselors who are saying, get rid of the homeless people, hide them. I don't want to see them. And what about the mothers and the children and compassion fatigue and all that nonsense? Why don't they look at capital projects that are on the books for them? So what does that mean? That means spending maybe 20 million bucks on a community center that's planned. Would you be willing to forego that? Would you be willing to gift back the 20 million to the city? No. What about the library that you want in Ancaster? Would you be willing to give that up for the next few years? It's not like it would never happen, but it might not happen for 4 or 5 years. That's a capital project that we're going to spend money on. Would you be prepared to give that up? Would you be prepared to give up the widening of a road in your area, which is going to cost tens of millions of dollars, and put it off The answer, of course, is because the people I'm talking about are people like Matt Francis, Tom Jackson, Mike Spadafora, Jeff Beattie, and so on. The answer will be no. I'm not giving that up. We're going to keep those projects. It's just I want you to get rid of these homeless people. And it's like, well, the only way to deal with this, the only way to help them is to spend money. And money's got to come from it. But these are the same people who say, don't raise taxes. We got Tom Jackson now flipping out over the water bill increase that's going to go up 9%. Well, Tom, what's your solution? We know you've got a problem with increases because you say my seniors can't afford to buy food. Okay, what are you going to do about it other than saying no? What are we supposed to do? Turn off the water? I don't know how that works, Tom.
So to leave this on a more hopeful note, the only way to help is, what's that?
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I'm working on it, Graham. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
This crisis can seem insurmountable, right?
Yeah.
So I got great advice from when I interviewed the Skid Row CEO on the Oshow. People should go back and check it out on our special on homelessness. I talked to him before the show and I said to him, like, how do I deal with this? Because it seems overwhelming, right? And he said, one person, one act at a time, right? So every single person that we help, every single Hamiltonian that we help get into a shelter or hopefully a transitional housing with supports for whatever they're dealing with, because it's a host of issues. A lot of them are health issues. Every single person who gets a chance at a life, at building a life, at supporting their family, because often it's whole families in these crises, they are the solution. That is the solution, right? So we need to have compassion individually for our neighbors. We need to hope that every person that we talk to, when we hand them, as you know, I like to carry $5 gift certificates for Tim Hortons in my car. So when they stop at the lights, I just say, you know, hopefully you can grab a lunch or something with this and get warm. Every single time that we show an act of kindness, every single time that we help people get into transitional housing, we are sending a ripple that will change generations in their family's life. So we cannot despair. We cannot get this compassion fatigue because the problem is huge. We have to help each person as we can every time. And we have to insist that our government, both at the municipal level, where they can delay other projects that are wants and put the money towards needs with a sense of urgency, we can make a difference on this problem. And we can demand that our Mayor, Andrea Horwath, as I said in my op-ed, get in the fight or get out of the ring. She can go to Ford and start demanding more money for people in homelessness, like Mayor Olivia Chow did in Toronto. She can start to be part of the solution instead of being a spectator to the problem in our city of people's lives collapsing and our historic buildings collapsing and our hope collapsing. There is a way to go forward, Graham. What we need to do as Hamiltonians is individually reach out and help every single person we can as we can, and demand that our leaders stop creating culture wars and division with this stupid rhetoric and these idiotic posts that they're making, and actually help people one at a time until as a community we're out of it. It's the only way it's going to work, and we need to get our mayor in the game.
Yeah, if I may,
I want to leave us with.
Great, and if I may just tag this on, Laura, I think for us to feel a sense of hope, we need evidence of progress. We need proof of progress. And that falls to the city and to all of the people who are messaging. Some of our counselors are really good at that. They provide constant information. It's fact-based, informational, and it speaks about issues, not just about nice things, you know, the barbecue event they attended and so on. And I will go so far as to say my counselor is good at this. I know he gets criticized by all kinds of people because Ward 2 is has really been a bit of the center for all of this, the issues, the big issues in the city. We got them in Ward 2. So I think what we need is proof of progress, in order to have a sense of hope. And that is a key responsibility. And I hope if Andrea watches this show, that she walks away, and any member of council for that matter, walks away from this and says, okay, we need to communicate better. If we are indeed making progress, and let's show it. The details matter, not the concepts. We get the concepts. We need, like you said, Laura, one person at a time. Like, how many people did we find housing for? We should know the number. Citizens in Hamilton, residents should be able to say, it's slow, but hey, in the last 12 months, we housed X number of people. And it's like the city housing Hamilton stuff. When you go from 10% vacancy to 2%, when you take 575 empty units and you turn them into almost zero empty units, that's progress. That gives me some hope. Not enough, but the only way I can even start to feel hope is to have those kinds of measurements. So thanks, Laura. This has just been very helpful for me.
You said you wouldn't criticize Andrea's team, her $1 million team. I will, because if there's nothing else that can be done out of a mayor's office, it's communicating those kind of details often and clearly, and giving people who are looking at the difference between another winter in a tent or not even trying, hope can be the difference in how people perceive their future, right? Like this is really important. We need the city to give people not bullshit, but a sense of hope that things are going to get better incrementally, but that they are priorities. Like that matters, communication, guys.
Can I just, I know I said I was finished before, but I need to say this because I want to comment on one of your areas of expertise is public relations, which of course involves communication. I think one of the things that we're very, very bad at as a city, even when we have information, we have a lot. Do you realize in the city of Hamilton, we have like 28 full-time communications people?
Tell me that, Graham. Don't even tell me
it's
that.
Awful. What do you think the payroll is for 28 people in 2024, whose job it is to communicate stuff to residents? But that isn't my point. My point is some staff might hear what I just said about numbers and say, well, it's on our website. We posted all this. You laugh because that's absurd. No one reads this stuff, or it was in a report. It's already published in one of our reports. I don't even read all the reports, and I'm engaged. 99% of residents not only don't read them, they don't have time to read them. So this whole notion of how do we communicate effectively in 2024 to create this sense of hope through proof of progress, it ain't happening through websites. Trust me. So that's
proactively, urgently, and aggressively. Those are the three ways to communicate in 2024 and 2025. I say that to the entire audience, whether it's fighting Pierre Poilievre, whether it's fighting Ford, whether it's fighting to give your city a sense of freaking hope. Those are the three things you need to do. Ain't hard, proactive, urgent, aggressive. Please, please. Graham, as always, I love talking to you. And I feel like we combined our 2-year check-in on council with our year-end review of all things Hamilton. And it was an epic show, but I wasn't going to cut it for 1 second because I think it's all important. And I know how much our audience loves to hear your wisdom. And there'll be lots of clips coming up from this. Thank you so much. If you are listening to the Oshow, subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast or watching. Subscribe so you don't miss any. I will try to get more Oshows up and out there. But you know what? It takes hope to want to deal with these issues. So we'll try to bring the hope, and we'll try to demand that our city gives Hamiltonians more hope. And if I don't have you on the pod again before the new year, Graham, I know I'll see you personally, but I just want to thank you on behalf of all of Hamilton, all our viewers and listeners. And I hope that you have a wonderful holiday, and let's make the new year even happier and more hopeful for Hamilton. Thanks for being on the pod.
Excellent.
When you care about current affairs, it's on the Oshow. And when you want to get clear what's going on here, it's on the Oshow. If you like to stay in the know, tune yourself into the Oshow. It's the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. With a lot of great guests, she puts them to the test on the Oshow. There's no doubt they'll be calling them out on the Oshow. Stand for something or fall for it all. Ontario, hear the call of the Oshow. It's a podcast, the Oshow. Laura Babcock's the Oshow. Stay informed with the Oshow, Oshow.
Your merch bid.